Good morning. Welcome to the last day of the March board meeting. Thank you for joining again and for joining on time. We still have a few things to go through this morning, but the first thing that I'd like to say is that I'm very grateful to the team and the task forces for being able to get back with the documents after the discussions that we had held here at the board. Thank you for this quick inclusion, absorption of the comments in the documents, and for allowing us in this last day of the meeting to get back to the documents and see if everything is okay. This morning we will still address and see the new version after our comments of the strategy and work plan, sustainability workstream 1 and 2, and after that we will have a short session on the IESBA and IESBA coordination and update before we close this session. Let's start then. And today we we also have the minutes that were put forward for comments and were include now the comments that were received, and I'd like to know if anyone else has anything to say or to any comment to provide with respect to the minutes. If not, the minutes are approved. Thank you very much to those who contributed, and thank you very much to the staff for including the comments that were received. We don't have Jens with us today. He apologized, as you know, but we had a commitment, a long-standing commitment in Germany, so he had to leave last night. With this, I'll give the floor to Jeff to present the new version of the strategy and work plan consultation document after the comments and the discussion that we held here around a number of topics in the document. Jeff, please.
Thank you, Gabriella, and good morning, everyone. So the planning committee had a chance to review the feedback and had a chance to look at the revised and so you receive the turnaround version this morning, which is agenda item 2D, which you have received yesterday. We have also included the PC's responses to both the IESBA's feedback as well as the CAG feedback to the posted version. So that was in agenda item 2E. So this morning we don't intend to cover all the changes. Of course, some are fairly editorial in nature and minor. We just want to cover a few things. A couple of things, but I've also received some advanced comments, so thank you for those, and I'll cover some of those as well. But the idea is not to get into a drafting session this morning. But first, if we can, when I say we, I mean me, move to the next slide. So we look at these two things, and so at the end of our discussion, we will look at asking the board to approve the consultation paper for the SWP. As I've mentioned earlier in the week, we intend to issue this just before the Easter break, so the first week of April. So the first key changes we want to walk through with you this morning is what we have revised on the IESBA vision, taking into account the comment and feedback we've received from both the board and the CAG. First, you will see that we have taken out the comments and just put back including independence. We'll put the bracket back. The way we draft this is consistent with how we usually frame our standards. It's ethics standards, or in our missions, including independence requirements. And so the way we draft this is consistent to how we normally explain our standards, so we put that back there. We did receive some comment from the CAG about whether we should change it to its ethics and independence standards, but we felt the way that we've drafted it now, or the way that we have expressed it now, is more consistent. The other change that we have made is, you will see in red there, we have added in business and organizations. This really is to give a bit more context to the term ethical behavior. Essentially, it's really about ethical behavior, within organizations, whether private sector, whether you are in the public sector or firm. And in business, we purposely is singular because we're not talking about individual business, but rather in a broad sense in the business community. So we want to see, and you notice that throughout this vision, this vision remains profession agnostic. So we're not just focusing on the accountancy profession, but also, really seeing the impact of our standard, not just within the accountancy profession, so really broadly in our society, in business and organizations. The next change that we have made is to remove the word production. We recognize that it can be a bit confusing, and we felt that it's a cleaner approach when we just focus on reporting and assurance. And in terms of, you might recall that last year we have comments about, obviously, professional accountants and some of our users are doing more than just reporting and assurance. They do tax consultations and other forms of consultations and other professional activities. We found that in business, ethical behavior, that kind of broadly captured those types of work as well. And finally, we've added sustainability of organizations in front of financial markets and economies worldwide. We have, as you may recall, received some comments at the board meeting about making sure we're not just limiting to financial markets. We want to look at the impact on the public more broadly, and we have received similar feedback from the CAG as well. So we found that adding organizations is sort of sufficiently clear that the focus is not just on the financial markets. And also, I think having worldwide at the end, as we originally have, it really covers the sense that it's quite broad. And and the PC agrees to also just keep the word sustainability as it is, as it has already been explained by Gabriella on the Monday meeting, that it's really more about sustainability in a broader sense, in the wider sense. So these are all the changes that the PC want to put through to the vision. So I'll pass it back to you, Gabriella, see if we have any board feedback.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jeff. Yes, I'd like to see if the board is comfortable with these amendments that have been made. Just one note: this vision will not be subject to a question to the stakeholders in our strategy and work paper consultation paper, because the vision is the board's vision. It's not something on which our stakeholders should give their opinion. So it's our vision, and therefore it would be important that this board feels comfortable. It doesn't mean that we can't adjust something along the way until the final document if we see that something there is not fine. But it would be important that the board sees this vision as being our vision and feels comfortable about it. Any comments? Andy.
Thank you, Chair. The reporting and assurance, I mean, I took everything you said on board, still seems a little narrow. Because you had mentioned other things, so I didn't, I don't mean to be drafting now, but I guess my suggestion would be maybe like analysis, reporting, and assurance to make it more broad, the public trust, because reporting and assurance just seems very narrow. So preparation, analysis, reporting, and assurance of financial, non-financial. Anyway, that's how I'm responding to it, is very narrow. I wanted to make it more broad.
Thank you. Andy. Ken.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Gabrielle. I think we have to, I suppose, appreciate that this vision is actually in two parts. One is really on the focus on ethical behavior in business and organizations. And when you think about ethical behavior in business, it's all about the professional activities professional accountants are going to be involved in. So whether it's analysis, whether it's consulting, whether it's advisory, it's all in there. And then the second part is more about the information itself. It's a focus on the information, and it's more about the reporting and the accountant's involvement in the reporting. Now, admittedly, we are intending this to be a bit more profession agnostic, so we're not making a specific reference to professional accountants or the accounting profession, but that's really the intent. The first part is really about ethical behavior in whatever circumstances accountants are going to be involved in no matter what professional activities or professional services they're providing within the context of businesses and organizations. Yeah, I mean, I just hesitate a little bit to try to be a little bit more granular in terms of how we are characterizing or describing the accountant's involvement with information, because it's analysis. It can be a lot of other things as well. And once we go down that path, you know, where do we stop?
You know, just responding to that, I appreciate that. I just thought reporting and assurance seemed very compartmentalized. But I mean, looking at the words with a microscope. So, but I've said my piece, so I'll be happy to move on.
Thank you, Andy. This is really a difficult exercise because we have been through different comments, some of them asking to reduce the list of, so that's why we dropped production. I remember that Kaylan in the CAG meeting suggested that we just dropped everything, like public trust in financial information, and that's all. So we are a little bit navigating this complexity. Why we landed here was, well, with the perception that we should be we should not have a shopping list of activities in the vision, but at the same time that it was important to have some anchor on what we do and the areas where we work. I'm not saying it's not perfect, but that's the reason why we are here a little bit halfway between describing all the activities and not having any reference and just making reference to the financial and non-financial information. Well, let's see. I see that we still have other comments. Felicia.
Thank you, Chair. I think I agree with this vision. The way it is drafted now, it's much better. The fact that it also includes organizations and it's not narrow in a sense is a good thing. In a way that it also addresses Christelle's issue the other day when she was mentioning about societies. So at least it englobes everything. And I think to Andy's question, how do you report something that you've not analyzed? I think reporting should also come from the analysis that you've done and preparation, because you only report something that you've prepared, you've analyzed, and then you report, and then you get assurance. So I think it has all elements that are required for a vision. So I support it fully. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. Christelle.
Yes, just to say that I'm comfortable with this formulation now. I think that we have a piece with ethical behavior in business and organizations that can capture what is not described in detail in the rest of the phrase. So I feel very comfortable with this vision. It's okay for me.
Thank you, Christelle. Sanjeev?
Just one short point, Gabriela and Jeff. If I'm reporting on something, is it possible that I've not prepared it? I would be analyzing something which is prepared by someone. So instead of the word production, will it be fair to add the word preparation? I may be compiling something, I may be doing something else, but will reporting cover that? That's just a thought, and I thought maybe the word preparation should come instead of the word production. For your consideration, please.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Ken?
Yeah, and maybe what I suggest is that we don't lose sight of the two preceding words or the three preceding words, because the focus really is on public trust. It is not on the laundry list of activities accountants might be involved in. It's whether it's preparation, the compilation, the analysis, the aggregation, the disaggregation, however you want to take it. We can dice this in 1,000 ways, but the focus is really on public trust. And what is the public is going to be focused on and interested in? It is about what is being reported internally or externally, for that matter, and also if there is going to be the assurance as well, which is an important part of the focus of the code from the assurance in the independence perspective.
Thank you very much. That's exactly what I was thinking, is that we have to focus on which is the subject of the public trust. And in that respect, we could even drop the 3, and because the subject would be the trust in financial and non-financial information. The question is whether we want, and that's what was agreed yesterday at the planning committee, to leave the reporting and assurance to make sure that we give sight of what are the 2 areas where this board acts. But everything can be discussed still. Mark.
Thank you. I'm very comfortable with the wording as it is in the revised draft, and I think, you know, we've got reporting and assurance. It would be no bad thing if our stakeholders in issuing the consultation came back and said, why haven't you also got X and Y and Z? So I'm very happy for that to emerge through the consultation process if it does. I still do wonder whether, even with what we've got at the end, with organisations, financial markets and economies worldwide, we should add in the public interest. It doesn't hurt to underline it yet again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Well, I think that we'd have to, the idea of including the public interest is, of course, interesting. The question is whether it fits into the sentence as it is. I mean, I don't know, drafting.
Well, I'll invite Andy first.
Sorry, I didn't see you.
I am perfectly happy to have it go out with this, but I'm actually responding much more favorably to dropping it all and say the reporting and assurance, and make it as broad as a vision as it could be with the public trust in financial and non-financial information. So, but you mentioned that, Chair, so I thought I would say that I kind of like that, but if it goes out like this, we could see how it comes back.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Laurie.
I was just going to say quickly that I kind of like the idea of dropping that because it gets right to the point. It slims this down, and you know, there's no confusion. I like the idea of dropping reporting and assurance of.
Thank you, Laurie. Christelle.
Well, if we drop that, and means we skip off that is fundamental, etc., etc., then I feel a bit uncomfortable that we don't have the sustainability aspect in our vision.
No, it's not. I mean, I may have missed something, but I think that what's here being suggested and supported by some of the board members is that we could drop not only production but also reporting and assurance.
Oh,
and then it would read and to public trust in the financial and non-financial information.
That is fundamental. Yes. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Rania.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's a good idea to drop reporting and assurance, and perhaps even add in the public interest if that fits. Although I think it's clear, but you could underline it. But I like the idea of just dropping reporting and assurance. As Andy said, you're just basically keeping it really broad, and that's really the objective, is public trust. In
Thank you, Rania. Chana.
Thanks, Gabriela. I also would support dropping reporting and assurance and having it wide. then I kind of like ending the sentence with worldwide mark, so we have another thing to disagree on.
You agree with?
With ending with worldwide, not to bring public interest again at the end. Like ending the sentence with worldwide, because that gives the global nature of the organization.
Sorry, Sadia. Thank you, Jana.
I too agree with dropping the words reporting and assurance. I think it's clear. I would caution against ending with public interest because it's already in the mission statement. Thank you.
Okay. Rich, please.
Yeah, I would be supportive of dropping the words also. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Vanya?
Yeah, I'm also supportive of taking out the words of reporting and assurance. I think it'd be clean.
Thank you, Vanya. Luigi?
The same for me. I support omitting reporting and assurance and making it very broad.
Thank you, Luigi. Yao Shu?
I also support the dropping the words reporting and assurance. Thank you.
Thank you, Yao Shu. Well, it seems that we have a, sorry, oh, Sanjeev, sorry.
You know, I will support the same, dropping these two words and ending with the word worldwide only. Yes, I'm also fine with it.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Well, it seems that we have a wide agreement around the table on dropping those three words, production, reporting, and assurance, and it would read, and to public trust in financial and non-financial information. With respect to the sorry. Sorry. So it would read like that. It seems not to, there seems not to be much support to including public interest at the end of the sentence because it's already there some ways. And yeah, I think it's the conclusion that we can take from this discussion is so it would read, if I may, to achieve global recognition and acceptance of its ethics, including independence standards as being a cornerstone to ethical behavior in business and organizations, and to public trust in financial and non-financial information that is fundamental to the proper functioning and sustainability of organizations, financial markets, and economies worldwide. Does it sound well? Being again clear that this is our vision, this is not our mandate or our regulation or whatever. It's not what we have to do, is how we see what we do and the purpose of what we do. Comfortable? Jeff and Ken, you worked so much on this. Are you comfortable as well?
Yep.
Okay. So good. Thank you. Thank you all for these good contributions. Jeff, back to you.
Thank you, Gabriela. Again, just a reminder, we are not going out for comments for this vision as Gabriela has suggested, but thank you very much for your comments. That was a good outcome. So we will move to the next slide. You would recall that some of the key comments that came through on Monday was in relation to the section that was termed as proposed new work stream. And the key comments are in relation to it does perhaps give the perception that we are definitely going ahead with these topics, and there were some concerns about whether we are at this stage, you know, we're still a few years away, whether we're in a position to make that commitment in terms of when they're going to start or whether we will take them. So the board's feedback was to really just to scale it back a bit and to kind of really address the perception issue. And so we let our stakeholders understand that these are really topics that we've been working on, thinking about. These are topics that are really under the board's consideration, but we will look a little bit more closely, perhaps in a year's time, as we continue to assess our current work plan, the status of our key key projects, resource available, and so forth. So what the planning committee has agreed to in terms of the changes you will see throughout the paper is that we've changed the title from proposed new work streams to potential new topics identified. The planning committee had a few options, but we felt that this is, really, we've landed on this, I guess, this suggested change, potential new topics identified. So really just saying that we've identified a number of topics that we want to look at in the new work plan, but we haven't made the commitment yet. The other thing is we thought it would help if we change the order of the section, changes order with the section on pre-committed work streams. Whilst the pre-committed work streams with all the post-implementation review, we do have to do them, but we don't want to give a sense, as Sun Never mentioned on Monday, that all we're doing is post-implementation reviews. We continue to focus on independence issues and ethics issues. So we've changed the order, so from a presentation perspective, again, the stakeholders will see this list of proposed new topics that we have been looking at. As suggested by Ken on Monday, we have removed the anticipated demand on resources, again, to demonstrate that we are not quite there yet. We also have an idea of how much resource it might take. Again, we don't want to give the perception that we are going ahead yet. Also, we have removed the potential new topics from the illustrative work plan at 24 to 27 at the end of the paper in one of the appendices. So these are the key changes the planning committee has worked through and put into the revised version you have today to address the comments from the board on this particular section on these sort of topics that we've been talking about. And we've also added a paragraph just to, again, demonstrate that to decide whether to start a new work stream, there's a number of factors. We'll take those into consideration. So with that, Gabrielle, I'll pass it back to you and see if there's any comments on those.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Comments to these suggestions, which aim at accommodating the comments from the board? Is everyone comfortable? Okay. Thank you very much, Jeff, and thank you very much to all of you. Back to you.
Thank you, Gabrielle, and thank you, board. Silence means acceptance, always good. Just a couple of other things I want to draw your attention to. I did receive some advanced comments, so thank you for those. You would recall that on Monday we had a couple of comments from Vanya and Rania in terms of public sector to make sure they are included in our strategy paper and in the consultation paper, to really give a sense that we are coordinating with our public sector, with the IFAC's public sector board, but also that particularly the PAIBs who work in public sector, our code does cover them as well. So you would note that we have changed the heading of one of the topics. If you go to page 5 of the paper, I won't show it on the screen. I think it's faster this way. Page 6, in fact, I'll read that to you if those of you haven't got the topic in front, is role of CFOs and then brackets including public sector equivalent and other senior PAIBs. So that's just a change in the topic heading, but within the sections themselves, we've included some words in reference to those CFOs and PAIBs in the public sector as well. So it should be clear to our users that those PAIBs are included, within the scope of the code. Now, I did receive a comment from Mark this morning that to say public sector equivalent, whilst he understands that that's what we're trying to say, but they are in fact, at least in some jurisdictions, that they, in public sector organizations, they are, those positions, they are called CFOs anyway, so it may create some confusion if you just say public sector equivalent. Staff suggestion would be to perhaps just change it back to the title to role of CFOs and other senior PAIBs, but keep the changes we made in the body of the papers, because we already include public sector in there, to avoid a confusion that Mark was referring to. So just want to see if the board has any comment about us changing the title of that topic back to role of CFOs and other senior PAIBs, but leave the other changes in the rest of the paper referencing public sector. Gabriella?
Thank you very much, Jeff. Assuming that you will you have clear the change that is being made, and if not, please question. I'd like to know if you are comfortable with the change that is being suggested. Paul, please.
Thanks so much. If anything, it's maybe a question. The inclusion of public sector equivalents in the title seems to, if anything, avoid any risk of misinterpretation. So why drop it? I'm not quite sure how that would be creating confusion.
It's probably more the word equivalent that might create confusion, but because in the public sector there are CFOs already, so we should probably just call them CFOs instead of equivalent. But I see Mark's card is up, coming with a answer.
Not necessarily an answer, but my comment to Jeff was, half of your audience will say, because you've said public sector equivalent, it's great that IESBA is acknowledging the public sector. Half of them will say the reference to a public sector equivalent means that IESBA thinks the public sector equivalent is not as good as the CFO. So therefore my suggestion was be neutral on it, and just, as Jeff said, have the heading which says CFO and other senior PAIBs.
Thank you, Mark. Andy.
Yeah, well, maybe I'm with Paul. I didn't respond to it that way, that it would have that evaluative sort of aspect. It would just to eliminate the micro analysis of the words that we don't literally have. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but I was okay with keeping the equivalent word in there, but I didn't. But I appreciate Mark's concern, but I didn't respond to it that way at all.
Thank you, Andy. Rania.
I actually had the same comment as Paul and Andy. So I mean, I understand Mark's point of view, but I think it can be seen both ways. It depends on how common the title CFO is in that jurisdiction, because in many jurisdictions the title CFO is more relevant or used in a private sector context rather than a public sector. So I mean, you have to be mindful of different jurisdictions around the world. So that was my only comment. Perhaps one alternative or one way around this would be to just drop the title and keep senior PA professional accountants in business. I mean, just to refer to the rank rather than the actual title, and then just remove all of this, and that would be like broad enough to encompass everyone. Just a suggestion. But I definitely see Mark's point, but I think that it depends who's looking at it, who's reading it, and how they perceive it. I think it's an issue of perception more than anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Rania. Jeff.
Thanks, Rania. I think we would probably want to keep the term CFOs in the title because we want to have that sort of focus. We're not saying that's the only group that we're focusing, but amongst the senior PIBs, that's one, I guess, one group within the PIBs community that we want to have a specific focus on. So I would think that we probably keep CFOs.
Thank you, Jeff. Chana.
I think I'm a bit with Mark on this one. Like why, if we are putting public sector, what about the not-for-profit sector? So to be, I like the idea of remove it from the heading and then have it in the detail information, because otherwise we are picking sectors, public sector, not-for-profit sector, private sector. So this way it will be sector neutral in the headings and it's in the details. And I mean, what people have to remember is the definition of professional accountants in business has the public sector in it. It's in the definitions.
Thank you, Chana. Felicia.
Thank you. I think I also want to agree with Chana's comments, and also Jeff, not to drop the role of CFOs. So I think it's important to keep the CFO in the title, since these ones are the people in charge of finance, and it's important to keep the CFO there. And also the fact that PIB includes those in public sector. So it's not dropping CFO and also keeping the PIBs is key. And to Mark, I think that one we can, including the other one, including equivalence. I think that one we can put it in the body of the explanations, but to keep it the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. Well, I think that we have a bit split views on this, but I would say that after these further explanations about what's in the definitions and etc., that can be easier to accept what Jeff is suggesting. Jeff.
Well, based on the comments, we have 3 for and 3 against. So, Ken?
No, I think the direction is clear, Jeff. I wouldn't try to do some vote counting here. That's not the point. The point, I think, Chana has really nailed it. We have to be careful that we're not inadvertently excluding a number of individuals who serve in that role, but they're in different sectors. And absolutely, non-profit is a very important sector that we should not lose sight of. So when we single out public sector, we might be messaging that actually the non-profit are not even under consideration. So my suggestion to the board would be to drop it out of the title, but to deal with the public sector angle within the discussion of the considerations in the document.
Thank you, Ken. Rania.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, I mean, I really like the way the public sector angle has been added into the document. And I mean, if you drop it from this title, and as everyone else, Chana said, if you include it in the description, I would be comfortable with it. I mean, I think it's really very well done. So thank you.
Thank you, Rania. Paul?
Maybe very much jumping off Andy's muttered comment. Can we just drop public sector and just say or equivalent, so it cuts across irrespective of sector, issue? Drop in the title the public sector word, but retain the or equivalent, so it applies to all at that level.
Well, Jeff?
I think the purpose of adding public sector equivalent is really to highlight that we do have a lot of PAIBs working in the public sector, and we do work with the public sector board as part of our coordination efforts. So if we drop in public sector, I think for simplicity and clarity, I will just drop the whole thing rather than keep equivalent in there. Because
if I may add as well, Jeff, I think, yeah, not to prolong the discussion, I think we will run the risk of bringing a lot of overlap, because we do have the trailing words, other senior PIBs, and those may well serve in a CFO role. So I think the point of the title is really just to signal the content of the discussion within the particular section, and not to try to pack everything in the title, so to speak. So I just caution against trying to be trying to over-engineer a title just because people are kind of reading a lot into it. We just have to be careful.
Well, Paul, are you comfortable with this additional information or justification? Comfortable, Andy? Comfortable? So I think thank you. Oh, we still have Christelle, sorry.
Just to say that I was comfortable with a generic title and that we don't have any definition of what is an equivalent. So, and I think it's enough generic to cover everybody and make everybody happy about getting to the content.
Thank you. So we drop public sector or equivalent. We keep CFO for the reasons that were pointed out by Jeff, because it's going to be an important part of our work, and we want to highlight it from the start. And I think that we have an agreement on this proposal, right? Thank you. Jeff, Christelle? No, Jeff.
Thanks, Gabriella. Just one more suggested change, or at least something to some thoughts from Luigi. If you have your paper, agenda 2D is paragraph 71. I can read it out to you. Currently, it reads that the IESBA will consider factors including the anticipated demand on resources, staff board, and agenda capacity, and then also the IESBA's ongoing assessment. Louise's suggestion is perhaps just drop the anticipated demand on resources, staff, board, and agenda capacity in that paragraph, because we have already made a number of references to resources. And also you would note that towards the end of that paragraph, we again comes back with when considering staff and board capacity. So we're looking at resource already. So we don't want to give the sense that, the overarching factor is resource, which is not. So I think that's a good suggestion. So unless the board has any other feedback, we'll take that part of that sentence out.
Any comment? Okay, agreed. Jeff?
Okay, thanks. Just one more advanced comment from Galen. You will note that as we describe the potential new topics identified, we have changed some of the wordings from will to intend, the board intends to. The rationale there is really just as, again, it's a perception thing. It's an object that is, it doesn't give the sense that we will definitely go and do these things. But it does, using intents to, it does give our stakeholders the sense that we have thought about it. So if we were to go and start a work stream on one of these topics, that's what we're thinking about. Galen's thought is whether the words is too strong, whether we need to stick with words like may instead of intends to, but I'm comfortable with intends to, but just want to see if the board has any other comments, and this is the last advanced comment I've received, other than a few editorials from Sunam, which we'll include in the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Ken.
Thank you, Jeff. As I read the text, and in light of Galen's comment, I'd be inclined to suggest that the board consider changing intents to would, because would is suppositional. It is, if indeed the board were to take up one of those potential work streams, the board would seek to do whatever this work stream is intending to address in terms of issue. So rather than will, which is perhaps too strong and definitive, or intends to, the alternative that I'd ask the board consider is to change it to would.
Thank you, Ken. Comments from the board? Do you agree with Ken's suggestion to change intents into would? Fine, thank you very much. It's agreed, so.
Thank you, Ken and Gabriella. So we will change the intents to wood. So I don't have any other advanced comments, so unless the board has any other comments that they want to raise with us today, I'm going to ask Ken to get the board to move to the next step to approve the draft consultation paper for issuance.
Yes, of course.
Thank you, Gabriel. Well, really just to make sure that the board is comfortable, that it can take a vote on the document. Rich, I saw that you were reaching out to the mic. You comfortable?
Only to move that we accept it.
Okay, good. Okay, well, it seems everybody's comfortable then to take a vote on the issuing the consultation paper to the public. So if I may ask the board to vote on it, it is a simple majority. In this case, it's not a pronouncement. So if you could just show hands for those board members who are voting to issue the document for consultation. 15, 16. Okay, we have 16 members. Gabriela, 4 out of 16 members, so we have unanimous approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. And at this point, let me thank Jeff and Ken, mostly together with the planning committee, which contributed a lot also to the strategy and work paper, and the board in its last, I think, 4 board meetings. But it's been a journey to get here where we are now. It's been a lot of work, a lot of discussion, and really strategic discussion at the board level, at the planning committee level, at the staff level. This is a very, very good work. I said it many times, but I will repeat. This is what will guide our action on the next few years. And it was what took us to bring a lot of strategic issues and considerations to the table. So it's not only a document for consultation, it's really the product of a lot of reflection about where this board wants to go to and where this board thinks that we are going to be relevant and useful, which is the purpose of what we do. So I'm happy that the board has managed to agree unanimously around this consultation paper. This is not the end of the road, as we can see there. This is almost the start of a new journey until this consultation paper tends to be a final document. But the most part of the work has been done, and it's a rich document in terms of the vision of the board about where we should go. Thank you very much for that. It was a very interesting journey until now. Let's see what comes after, but I think that this is the critical, the most important landmark in this work of getting ready with our strategy and work plan. Thank you. Robert, sorry, Robert Steven.
Just a quick comment from me to thank you for the discussion. This is very responsive to the public interest, and we'll await the comments in terms of the due process and look for PIOB approval in a year's time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Yes, let's move to the next topic in the agenda. I hope with the same level of success and agreement that we had here. And the next topic is on sustainability. Again, thank you to the team and to the task force for the turnaround of the documents so in such a short time frame. And I'll give the floor to Mark. I think it's going to be you who will start to present on the changes that were made since Monday, where we discussed this topic.
Thank you. I don't know whether Jeff's given me something to move the slides forward or something that will explode in my hand if I press the wrong button, because it's got some interesting different colours on. So I just want to give the board a quick update, sort of based on the very helpful feedback that we were given earlier in the week. We've had a couple of meetings and an opportunity to think things through further and thanks to Sylvia for turning everything round in an exceptionally short window to actually allow us to come back to you. So the first thing that you'll remember we discussed was the definition of sustainability assurance engagements, and you'll see here that what we've done is we've kept with the sustainability assurance engagement definition that we proposed. Obviously, you'll see there that the proposal that will define terms within the glossary. And the reason for going with this proposal is, of course, it aligns very closely with the IESBA and what they're proposing in their draft ISSA 5000. It also aligns with the current assurance engagement definition within our code, and that will mean that the definition and the standard that we develop will focus, obviously, on assurance-type engagements. What we will also do within the definition is we'll explain the application of limited and reasonable assurance within an assurance engagement, and again that aligns with ISSA 5000. Just for information, obviously this is the text that is there within the draft ISSA 5000. It really is just included for completeness. It's not really to go through. But I say that will give us a strong framework within that sustainability assurance engagement definition. The next question that we discussed with the board was the scope of the work that we're looking to do. And when I say the scope of the work we're looking to do, we were steered by the comments from the board and also the advice that we received from Robert as our PIOB observer, that we've got to make sure that what we're delivering is manageable within the resources and within the time that we've got. So there's a recognition that there will be opportunities for the board to do further work in further periods, but this is what we need to focus on at this point, because these are the issues that are most important to address in the public interest. So new ethics and independence standards equivalent to Part 4A. Note we're still awaiting feedback in the global roundtables to see which of the options we go for, but nevertheless the new ethics and independence standards that are developed will apply to sustainability assurance engagements of heightened public interest, and these are the criteria that we were talking about. So an assurance is provided on sustainability information reported in accordance with a general purpose reporting framework, and I'll talk a little further about that with the next slide. And also the sustainability information is publicly available to support decision making by investors or other stakeholders, or is required to be provided in accordance with law or regulation. And then for the sake of completeness, you've got the second statement there. The sustainability assurance engagement is specified by national law or regulation. So what we're doing is setting a clear framework that governs our work. We do, of course, recognise that engagements will also still be carried out on a voluntary basis, and those who carry out those engagements will still be able to use the material that we develop for the code in that respect. For other sustainability assurance engagements which are not meeting that test of heightened public interest, PAs will continue to apply Part 4B. On to general purpose sustainability reporting framework. So what we've done is we've chosen to set out here a definition by what we mean. So a sustainability reporting framework designed to meet the common sustainability information needs of a wide range of users who are not able to commission information on the entity themselves. And in this context of this part of the code, a general purpose sustainability reporting framework is a fair presentation framework that requires adherence to the requirements of that framework. So what we're doing is we're proposing that our work will focus on fair presentation frameworks, not compliance frameworks, although obviously that is a decision that can be taken in future to extend that work. So what does this do? Well, it acknowledges the fact that to achieve fair presentation of sustainability information, it may be necessary to provide disclosures beyond those that are particularly required by that framework, and it may also be necessary to depart from that framework to achieve a fair presentation. So you've got there a way of bounding the scope of the work that we're going to do. We also had a discussion about how our work would fit in to the PI regime, bearing in mind, of course, that that has been a recent addition to the code, and so a piece of new work. So we recognise that there will be different regimes for PI and non-PI sustainability assurance clients in respect of the independent standard. This aligns with the CSRD, and one of the things we discussed at length is the importance of having equivalence there, because that is, in a sense, one of the first regimes to get moving. And therefore, if we can't demonstrate that we are equivalent, it will impact on the take-up and the adoption of the code. The PI definition for audit engagements would also apply in the context of the sustainability assurance engagements. We're not proposing any changes to the revised PI definition that comes into effect in December 2024. But what we will do is provide guidance to support jurisdictions who might want to add additional PIs in the context of sustainability engagements. So that would be to build on para 418 for professional bodies in jurisdictions, and also for firms in respect of considerations about their clients. So we would look to build on 419. We've then got here a helpful sort of flow chart which shows how this regime would work. So you've got a sustainability assurance engagement that's deemed to be of heightened public interest, including where required by law or regulation. So that's what we were talking about on the previous slide. If you go down the yes route, you've got application of Part 4A or 5A, depending on which option we choose. And then you've got the consideration, is the sustainability assurance client a PI? If yes, the provisions applicable to PIs. If no, provisions applicable to non-PIs. So very much building on the architecture that the code has. If the answer is no, then you've got application of Part 4A or 5A is not required. If the sustainability assurance provider is a PA, then they've got application of Part 4B. If they are not a sustainability assurance provider, then you've got voluntary application at the moment, pending any sort of regulatory action by jurisdictions of Part 4B or other standards. And then the final thing I want to show you is that sort of Robert set a challenge about how we would demonstrate this mapped to the public interest framework. And I'll show you the next slide, but I want to caveat it with, this is our first cut, and we will continue to use this as a living document, and it will be iterated and updated as we get further feedback through the global roundtables and through our stakeholder engagement. So what you'll see is it takes the options from the original paper that we discussed earlier this week. It takes the 5 public interest framework attributes, so comprehensive, scalable, clear, implementable, and globally operable and enforceable. And what we've done is we've done an initial assessment which is based on either fully, partly, or limited. So you'll see that there are some initial assessments that we've made. We'll continue to test those assessments and see whether or not those need to change as we actually go out there and speak to our stakeholders further. So I hope that this will be helpful in giving us a basis for a dialogue with our stakeholders on how the work we're proposing to do is going to meet the public interest objective. Few words beyond that. Our intention now in respect of the independence standards is that we will now proceed with drafting. That drafting will not sort of anticipate the decision the board still has to take of where those standards will sit. So is it in 4A, 5A, is it where else? But we need the text. And the intention is to develop as much of that text as possible to allow the board to do a first reading in June. I think it's important that we get to a first reading in June, only because we recognise that this is an area of significant interest to the board, and we want to be able to put something to you sooner rather than later and give the board a chance to give direction and discuss further and ask more questions. So our intention is to have that discussion with you when we meet again in New York in June. And certainly we've got an in-person meeting at the beginning of May to help us take that work forward. So that's all I wanted to say at the moment, Gabriella, but obviously I'm very happy to take any questions that board members have.
Thank you very much, Mark, and task force and staff for bringing this document back to us, or bringing the considerations that the task force had the opportunity to make on the comments that were made by the board members. Any comments, suggestions, questions on Mark's presentation? Sadia, please.
So, Mark, I agree with you that I think that whatever we've landed on now has to result in drafting. So any of the comments I make is not something that should stop drafting, but should be, these are things that you might need to consider as we go along. If you could turn to slide 7. So this is the only part in the whole presentation that I'm having a little confusion on, and it's the word heightened public interest in the first one. And I just want to avoid any confusion as we go to our audience, because if it had a heightened public interest and we go to yes, the next orange one says, is the sustainability assurance client a PI? And my understanding is that a PI is an entity that has heightened public interest. So just the wording on that first, on the starting, on the word, whether it's heightened public interest or if we can use another word to capture what we're trying to. So I acknowledge that that takes us to slide 4, and I'm comfortable with what's on slide 4. I just caution on the double use of the word public interest. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rania, and I will ask Mark to respond if possible now, because I think it's an important topic before we move to the other comments.
That's a really helpful steer, so thank you for that, Sadia. I think we've sort of almost adopted this term of heightened public interest, really sort of back from when the working group was considering it, but now you see it on that slide. I do accept that it could result in confusion, so we will have a look at the terminology and ensure that there's no risk of it being confused or conflated.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Sadia, because I think it's a helpful comment. Rania, please.
Thank you. So just to go back to the slide on it's an assurance but not a compliance framework. Yeah, so it's about a fair presentation, not a compliance framework. Definitely, I agree. I mean, I see where this is coming from, and I agree with the general sentiment of this. And fully aware that we don't know exactly what reporting requirements will be on sustainability information. I just wanted to caution that when it comes to the governance piece of ESG, most of it is around compliance with anti-corruption and anti-bribery conventions. So it's not like, for example, you're reporting on your carbon emissions. You get my point? It's about being compliant with anti-corruption or anti-bribery conventions. So just to pay attention to this.
Thank you very much, Rania. Mark, do you want to react now?
Yeah, just very briefly. I think I absolutely understand your point, Rania. I think this is very much our intention of trying to come up with a mechanism that prioritises the work that we can do to deliver an exposure draft in the second half of this year. So I do sort of keep trying to emphasise the fact that there will come a point where we need to have a discussion as a board about, is there a second stage to this work? And for board members who heard the working group's presentations last year, you know, we always talked about potentially a 4A type project and at a later date a 4B type project. Well, in a sense, we've still got 2 projects, except one is about a fair presentation framework. The other that might follow it may be more around a compliance type framework. So It's not to say that these things aren't important. It's just to say, can we pick off the most important things from a public interest perspective and deliver those first within the time constraints and the resource constraints that we've got? And then let's have a discussion as a board about potentially a further stage to the work.
Thank you, Rania and Mark. Rich.
Thank you. So Mark, I have a kind of maybe couple of thoughts and questions that are somewhat interrelated, and it starts with building off of Rania's comment. I'm trying to understand how an investor or the public interest is attended to when it appears that information that either isn't under a general framework or information that isn't part of it, isn't required by law or regulation, would be on a voluntary basis, which is described at the bottom of 4. And then similarly on the slide that has the diagrams, the part on the left side where you either aren't going to follow the sustainability guidance or you're voluntarily. I'm just not sure I follow why we wouldn't just say, because I think there's going to be disclosure of information in certain sectors that isn't required by law or regulation and may or may not be of heightened public interest, but it's of interest to certain invested sectors, particularly in the asset management space, where they typically want to know certain things so they can say all of their investees do X or Y or meet some standard, and then to the point that some of these things that could be disclosed are not well defined yet, things around governance and social, like diversity and inclusiveness. I'm having a little trouble that we would apply our standards to some, and then in that same information presented to investors, other engagements would not be subject to the same rigorous standards, which is, maybe I'm misinterpreting what we're saying, but that's the gist of my question.
So in that case, Rich, I've probably not set it out really in a way that's helped, but our intention is the first step, the priority, is to develop standards that will support the delivery of limited or reasonable assurance engagements, mainly because from the investor perspective and from the user perspective, there is a greater clarity about what is being provided over that information than if you are looking at, say, special purpose frameworks and individual elements of information that don't come together in a reporting framework. So our intention is to pick off those as the first piece. What we say, of course, is that where there are other engagements that are picking off pieces of information or things under a special purpose framework, we've still got that route that people could use the 4B route by way of delivering an assurance engagement, although it wouldn't be that reasonable or limited piece that we're focusing on as the initial cut of our work. I think the task force shared your concern about when we look at this, will it be clear to investors and end users what they're actually being given? And therefore our intent was to say, here are the ones over which we can provide the greatest clarity and provide an assurance framework that is subject to high standards of independence, and recognise that other elements are things that may have to follow on in subsequent stages of this work.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, Rania, but I think that this topic is important, and it is important that the board is absolutely clear about the option that is being proposed and about what's on the table. I think that it's clear that Rich's concern is legitimate and is important, and I think that it's important that the board understands that a few things are being left out, so to speak, of the scope of the work for now, as Mark says. It is also important to understand the reasons why Mark is suggesting that that we go in this way, and that we have to assume that a few important things will be left out for now, and we will see after. I think it's more about assessing the relevance of what is not going to be in this framework, and it's therefore not subject to the higher trust that these standards aim to provide, against the time that we have, the resources that we have, and what we can do at this first stage. It's this balance that it's, I think, being discussed here. Thank you very much for raising it, Rich, and thank you very much for the clear response, Mark. But let's listen to the others. Of course, on this and other topics that you may have, we're not restricted, discussion will not be restricted to this topic. Rania, please.
Okay, so Mark, I'm just looking at this from a very, very granular, practical point of view, and from my personal engagement on anti-corruption issues in prior, settings. So I'm just wondering how, if let's say a company is reporting on its governance practices, okay, I'm just seeing how it is possible to just give giving assurance on, in terms of fair presentation on governance. I'm looking at it from a very practical perspective. I don't see how you could report on fair presentation on governance information. From my experience on with governance issues, they're basically about whether or not you have been compliant with anti-corruption and anti-bribery requirements and conventions. And so I think perhaps in that sense, it would make, I understand that you cannot give reasonable assurance if, let's say, you don't want to certify, but it might be more practical to give limited or negative assurance. Like, for example, we are not aware of, let's say, any, bribery, or whatever, corrupt practices that have been going on. I think it would, from a practitioner's point of view, it's easier for them to give this form of an assurance, rather than say the information is fairly presented. It would not make sense. And I'm just looking at it from a very, practical point of view.
And that's, that's one of the difficult decisions that we have to take, because as you say, if an entity is reporting on something like anti-corruption and is looking for some sort of conclusion, and that conclusion isn't based on a framework, and it's something ultimately that says, well, we haven't seen anything that says that there's nothing, that you should worry about it. Like, in a sense, that is a statement, but one that sits outside of a reporting framework and probably sits outside our immediate priority in terms of what the independence requirements are going to cover. As I said, there are two routes that we can go down. One is that the board can subsequently say, we want a second stage project, which then moves on to look at how this applies in the context of a compliance-based framework. Or we may see through, for instance, the IESBA agenda consultation, proposals about future standards that look at human capital and human rights, and do so in a context of something that is more akin to a fair presentation type framework. So this gives us the flexibility, and one of the things that, well, you won't have heard, but others around the table will have heard, the sort of James Gunn use previously, is maintaining the flexibility to pivot as things change. So it's not that we're ruling out your example, it's we're saying that the priority is to carve out and deliver on the reasonable and limited assurance engagements in accordance with a framework, because that's the most significant public interest issue, and then come back to the board with a future proposal that might be looking at a compliance-based framework. But if we try to do all of it, we won't have an exposure draft in the second half of 2023.
No, I understand this perfectly well, and I agree with you. All I'm saying is, given that we're looking at sustainability, generally we're looking at the E and the S and the G, This means that, let's say when this is rolled out and practitioners want to apply it, and they want to give assurance on sustainability information, they might have to say, okay, we're going to give assurance on the E and the S, but not the G. You're going to have to exclude some part of it, because all I'm saying is that the G piece of the sustainability information might, and I might be mistaken, of course, I mean, it all depends on what the disclosure requirements ultimately end up being. But the way things are right now, I anticipate that there is a high likelihood that when it comes to governance disclosure requirements, most of them are going to be sort of compliance frameworks. That's what I'm saying. So in other words, effectively, looking ahead, it might be that we're excluding the G part of the ESG. That's what I'm saying.
No, and I understand that, but you also raise a really important additional point, which is we will be, in a sense, reliant on our coordination with the IEESB to determine how practitioners will report. And therefore, there is a risk that's posed by the IEESB moving to a faster timetable, because there are some very significant questions, like the one that you've just raised, that actually needs to be factored into this wider package of assurance, ethics and independence standards. And therefore, you know, although we continue to have dialogue and the staff continue to have dialogue with the IEESB staff, you've given us a really good example of the need for proper alignment and coordination between the two boards. And this would be a really good example of why there is a risk if the IEESB decides to move significantly quicker than it originally intended to. So I think you've given us a really good example that we need to factor into those further discussions.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you very much, Rania. I'm going to give the floor to Ken because I think that you want to say something, but no, oh, yes, okay. But I'd just like to raise again the importance of this discussion. We are really starting to make decisions. Beyond making the decisions, we are starting discussing why we are making these decisions. And this is extremely important because I never mind, and I'm sure that you never mind, making decisions which are hard to make, leaving things out, going in a different direction than the one that we theoretically would like, as long as we have all the risks on the table, and we know that we take some risks and that something is going to be left out, and that we are ready to explain and to assume it properly to our stakeholders. So I think this is also an important moment and discussion, and thank you for raising that so clearly, Rania, and for your reaction, Mark. I think it's a very good discussion. Ken?
Yeah, it is on this point, Gabriel, and maybe other board members might have also reflections on the question, I suppose, that Rania, you have raised. I think we really have to examine the definition of a general purpose framework that will be very critical to the scoping of the engagements that will be in or out. And in that context, we have to understand what in particular is going to happen in the EU in relation to the mandatory reporting. And if in the first stage of running out the mandatory reporting and the related assurance, that first phase is going to be focusing mostly on climate-related, or the E of the ESG part of the equation, then maybe that's what this board ought to focus on. To Mark's point, let's be reasonable and sensible as to what can be achieved within the amount of time that we have. And also understand how the market is going to evolve in relation to governance reporting, or even on the social issues, etc. Because we don't know, we have to really have a solid understanding of what's going to happen in the market. Regarding the point about coordination with IEESB, that is certainly a matter that we can further reflect on. The approach that they are taking with regard to their ISSA 5000 standard is they are approaching it very very generically because they are not quite so much referring to general purpose reporting framework, but their focus is on the suitability of the criteria. And that is very much a technical assurance concept, the criteria against which the subject matter is being evaluated for purposes of reporting. But it is something that we can raise with them just to understand how our question in relation to, let's say, compliance frameworks will intersect with their approach in relation to criteria. And if indeed there is a matter for coordination, then we have to have those conversations. But I would say that we have to understand first and foremost what is happening or what is going to happen in relation to reporting in the marketplace, and how let's say how the regulation is going to evolve over the coming years in relation to the different parts of the ESG landscape. But that's to say, Rania, that we're not going to forget it, but definitely it is a matter that's on the radar screen, as it were.
Thank you, Ken. Luigi.
Thank you, Mark, for the presentation, for the clear view that your group has expressed. As far as the definition of general purpose sustainability report, I have to confess that I still need some time in order to digest it, because I think it will be very key in orienting your activity. And it is true that we need also to clearly observe what will happen on the market and in the regulation space. On the other end, if this is to be intended as a tentative possible definition to be, let's say, fixed or, let's say, change in the future on the basis of the evolution and on the basis of the coordination with the other board, I think that we are fine, because at least we had the starting point for you to start doing your job in a very fast way, I think. Well, I don't know. I hope. And I think we have sufficient time later during the process to come back on the definition and to try to fix it and to adjust as needed. And I'm pretty sure that this will happen, because, say, during your work, I'm pretty sure that we'll arrive at a situation where we will need to change something. But at least I see the very good starting point for you to start to work.
Thank you, Luigi. And obviously, absolutely, we can go back and do that later on in the process. And indeed, I hope he won't mind me saying it, but Robert used the example earlier and said in his sort of, in times of his career when he's been doing legal drafting, the thing that you draft last is the definitions. And we should be alive to that. You know, we shouldn't be hemmed in by it. We should use it to maximize our flexibility to deal with the issue that we've got to deal with. So yeah, very much welcome it.
Thank you, Mark. Angie, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mark and Task Force and staff, for all this material. And I'm also still assimilating, and I'll promise to get you some comments in the very near future. I wonder if we could go to slide 7, if that's possible, because the question that I don't think we've discussed conceptually that I want to make sure I understand. The word voluntary is used a couple places in the slides, but it's the lower left part that uses voluntary. And I just want to make sure I understand in which the context is. So an assurance engagement is being performed under some set of assurance standards, and I understand if it's not done by a PA, that's the no on the lower left. The voluntary application of Part 4B or other standards, is it really the or other standards? Because if it's the at least as things are written now with regard to a non-PA, is they need to represent they comply with IESBA or equivalent standards. Is that what was getting at here? Because I don't respond well to voluntary application of independent standards.
I suppose, Andy, it's more an indicative example, which is we can see examples coming whereby someone who is not a practitioner is engaged to do a piece of work. they are not under any regulatory requirement to use this standard, however they might choose to. Or, for instance, the audit committee chair of the organisation asking for it may say, if you want this piece of work, you've got to use the IESBA code or something equivalent to govern your independence and ethics. So it was just an acknowledgement that there might be no regulatory framing yet that requires you to use this, but people still can.
Okay, so voluntary means it's not regulatorily stipulated, but it would seem to me that under a framework, there ought to be either IESBA or something else. So it's not, voluntary to me means it could be nothing, it could be 4B, or it could be something else. So I'd prefer if nothing is not an acceptable answer, which I'm guess betraying that I don't think is correct, that it should be nothing, that it's either application of Part 4B or some other standards.
Yeah. And we'll make that clear, Andy, because you are absolutely right in that respect. Okay. It's just that the slide is a rapid indicative example, but we need to refine that.
No, and I just wanted to make sure I wasn't, and I didn't mean to wordsmith it. I didn't know if this was conceptually that the task force was indicating that it could be discretionary, nothing. And I'm glad that I think you've confirmed my suspicion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy and Mark. Vania.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment on Rania observation from my perspective of the current situation about sustainability. I think that there is very low risk that the governance part will be left behind, because the main episodes that we've been finding in the market was exactly the lack of good corporate governance being operative in the moment. So I don't think that the market agents, the regulators, will be happy if the corporate governance is not put there as a solid basis for us to work on environmental and social aspects. So I don't think that it will be possible for the corporate governance to be left behind. That's not what the standard setters I've been following have been taking into consideration.
Thank you very much, Vania, for that comment. Mark, do you want to respond?
I just think again, thank you, because it's very helpful feedback and very helpful comment from the board as we continue to refine this. And the task force looks very much forward to giving you some material to kick the tyres and test at our meeting in June. I've also listened and noted to all of your comments, because they're going to form the basis of my application for a second term if I'm ever going to achieve all of the work that board members want delivering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Robert.
Thank you, Chair, just for the opportunity to comment on this. I think this is a very important issue that's been raised by Rania and confirmed by Vania, we're at a point in time now with the key point in time, as the Chair said, with this project proceeding on to the drafting. This mapping of the public interest framework is great, and Mark, in our discussion just before the meeting began, you were confirming that there's not really any need to make a decision on this at the moment, but keep this under review, and I think you've said that during the presentation as well. And I think I'd say the same thing for the point that's just been discussed. The keeping under review the scope issue, particularly the ESG, and covering all the three elements of E, S, and G, and mapping them constantly against the relevant qualitative characteristics. And I'm sure you'll do that, but I just thought it would be helpful again to look at how the utility of this public interest framework and doing that should be helpful.
Thank you very much, Robert, for the support and for the comments, and thank you for this very good discussion. I think that there are some flags that were raised here that the task force will of course consider and see how they can be addressed in the future work that you'll be doing. This balance between what we have to do, where we want to go, what issues we want to cover, and the time we have will be actually something that will be present in the work of this task force and of the board on the next 2 years, a little bit less. So it's good that we start getting used to make this as an exercise of balancing benefits and costs of the decisions. And it's important that this kind of very substantial issues are raised, no matter what I mean, it matters, but irrespectively of the decision or the response that we will have, but starting to listen to people around the table raising issues like corporate governance as being absolutely critical and fundamental. It's something that it's also it's remarkable, and it's something that we should highlight, irrespective, again, of what the response and the possibility of going through moving along, including these topics is or is not. So thank you for this very good discussion. I was also going to mention this table, which is very interesting. Of course, it is what it is. I think it's an initial. It's about an initial perception or an analysis of what each of the options could mean. It's still subject to some challenge, but I think that it's very useful. It allows us to start using the public interest framework from the start of the exercise and not at the end, which should be not appropriate, but at the same time, in this concrete aspect, gives us some light about the options, being clear to me, and I think that to Mark and to the board, that we can't postpone this decision for much longer. We have to listen to our stakeholders in the roundtables, and this is critical for the decision that we will make. I hope that we'll have the appropriate input, but we have really to start focusing on the content of the standards, the decisions that we will make, etc. So thank you very much. If there is no other comment, Ken, yeah? Yeah? So we would break now. It's 11, sorry, 2? Sorry? Yeah, 20 minutes, 11. Yeah, I'm going to ask Ken because otherwise he will say that my clock, my watch is not.
Yeah, I would suggest we take a break because we've been going on for an hour and a half, and it's just a second section relating to sustainability reporting, which we'll come back to, and then we'll close off with the update and coordination with IESBA. So my suggestion to the board is to reconvene at 11:25. So that's 11:25 in Abu Dhabi time. Thank you.
So, welcome back to the last part of our fifth day board meeting, and the topic now is the work stream 2 sustainability. Work stream 2 sustainability work and the turnaround of the documents, or some proposals after the discussions that we held on on Monday. And for that purpose, I will immediately give the floor to Christelle, please.
Thank you, Chair. So we are going to address 2 issues that were raised by the board 2 days ago. We're not quite there. Okay, can I? No, it doesn't work. I'm sorry. Well, let's, yes, here we are. So, the first one is on the definition of sustainability information, and the second one on sustainability assurance practitioner. So, on the sustainability information, why do we need a definition? This was one of the questions of the board. Well, according to the public interest framework, IESBA standards should have an appropriate scope to clearly specify to whom they apply. In addition, there are 2 definitions in the code for financial reporting and assurance, so it's likely that we will also need an equivalent for sustainability to use along or instead the term used for financial reporting and assurance. For instance, for nuclear and independence provisions. Whether it's an equivalent to historical financial information or to financial statements or both, that's something that Workstream 2 will reflect on when we start drafting. The second question on this was, well, to what extent can you align with other definitions? Well, I just repeat, we feel we cannot align with IESB's definition because ours should be less technical. These are the reasons we presented on Tuesday. We cannot adopt the IESBA definition nor the FREG for the reasons I explained Tuesday, but also because we should have a neutral framework expression. If I may, in addition, if we simply adhere to others' definition, they may change over time, and we will have no say on that. So, for these reasons, we recommend to have a broader approach. Now, what should be the definition? The attribute of that definition should be our intention is to keep it broad with reference to ESG, which is a commonly understood term, to keep it framework neutral, to cover historical and forward-looking information, to make it work for both mandatory or voluntary reporting and assurance, etc. So Workstream 2 will work on a draft when we start drafting the standards, and we will have more visibility then, but this is the way forward, our intention to build up this definition. There was a suggestion from the board to simply reference to applicable reporting and assurance framework. And we discussed this, and we think we will take this suggestion into consideration, but it may not be sufficient for those cases where the reporting is done voluntarily and no structured frameworks exist or is used. So we will consider whether it should be also a definition or a description, because there is a difference within the code expression between those two notions. And because description type of explanation could give more flexibility in the use of the code, if I understand well. So with these explanations and hopefully answers to the board's remarks and observation, we would like to have your views on this proposed approach.
Thank you very much, Christelle. I think that the proposals and the questions are quite clear. And it would be important after the discussion that we had last Monday around these topics and the different contributions from the board members, that you now comment on these proposals and express your comfort or any other thing. Any other suggestions, questions, doubts? It's the right moment to solve any doubts that you may have. Rania, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really like the idea of making a reference to other frameworks and providing a description in order to, to account for the possibility that the reporting is the disclosure is voluntary and does not comply with any particular frameworks. But I think that would be good enough.
Thank you. This is actually one of the options that is here very clear on the table, which is to go broad and capture or be go in a way that these standards will be interoperable or capture or work together with many other or possible other standards. I was seeing, no, not anymore. So I have myself one question, if I may. Sorry, Ken. One small question. If you go back to slide, sorry, I was trying to open it. If you go back to, I think it's the former slide. Yes, this one. You said, well, our proposal is to keep the reference to ESG because it's the expression that it's known. We had that discussion time ago when we started discussing the sustainability project, and it was a decision of, at least at the staff level, but I think that we discussed it at the board level, not to use ESG but sustainability, because sustainability is, well, it's ESG is used in certain circles, but sustainability tends to be broader because ESG is really environment, social, and governance, while in some frameworks, in some areas, sustainability goes beyond that. And it's the word that we are using for the groups, for the documents, etc. So my preference would be not to use ESG, which is being part of a jargon, and it's being used in a very, to my view, not concrete sometimes way, and to stick to the option that we made by that time to use sustainability instead of ESG. Subject to discussion and preferences, of course. Kellen.
If I may, we had when we had that discussion, it was that we used the term sustainability in the code more as the large overarching wording for what we are going to add. But our purpose is to illustrate within a definition, a description. We'll see what it copes with, but to illustrate what it is, and not to stay with the absence of any kind of wording. So environment, social, and governance will not be a substitute, but only an illustration within this definition or description.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Christelle. We will see how it looks like. It's not anything that we can't discuss after. Rania, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, I mean, I understand that you would want to describe, I mean, that's just in the description or whatever narrative that you decide to include, you may want to talk about, I mean, that explain that it includes environment aspects, social and governance, but I would recommend that you consider like having some form of it that is open-ended, because you never know when sustainability information might be, you know, broadened to include other aspects. You know, so before it was governance, and then it was environment, and then it was ESG, and so this is a very dynamic, I think, area which we should expect might change or expand. So keep that in mind. That's my suggestion.
Thank you, Rania. Galen.
Thank you. I think I tend to agree with the comments that Rania just made. There might be more flexibility in referring to a description, and less of one if there was a definition that might be required to be in the glossary. I don't know. But, and then the ESGs. I use that all the time in my note taking because it's pretty easy. ESG is fine for me, but we should be talking about sustainability again because it's broader, and I think it would be more incorporating of events that might happen down the road. Intuitively, on the idea of the framework, or excuse me, the historical and forward-looking matter on financials, I tend to, just one caution there, if we talk about historical, in historical financial reporting, there's already a lot of notions that are forward-looking, like impairment and maybe financial instruments, some of the other areas that take into account events in the future. So I'm not sure that historical would be the right approach. I think forward-looking might be better. And then let's see, I think that's kind of it. Yeah.
Thank you, Galen. I think that Jeff wants to say something.
Yeah, just quickly, thanks, Galen, and Rania. Just a reminder, those factors that we've got, ESG, framework neutral, and historical and forward-looking, we're not saying that those words or terms will make it to the definition of sustainability information. What we are saying is that we want to make sure the definition is broad enough to cover historical and forward-looking information, and it's broad enough that it's framework neutral, and it's broad enough to cover any ESG matters and other sustainability information, other matters that's relating to sustainability information.
Thank you, Jeff. Galen, do you still want to add something? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Vania.
Thank you. Just to clarify, the purpose here is not to replace the term sustainability for ESG, but rather to state what sustainability means so we can, from then on, use the term sustainability more frequently and more consistently in the document. And I understand Rania mentioned that it can expand, but in actuality, the term ESG as the complement for us to get to a sustainability is the one used for since the Rio Plus 20 in 2020 and 12. So I think it's pretty much established. Sometimes we find some organisms on water trying to expand them, but for example, as EFRAG did in their definition, mentioned that sustainability will involve environmental, social, and governance, and human rights. Human rights is already covered by the definition of social, so it is not exactly an expanding, but much more a question of splitting it from a concept where it is already considered. Just to give something to thought.
Okay, thank you, Vania. I understand that. Thank you for this additional clarification. I would leave it as an open issue for discussion because I think it's not the time now to discuss it extensively. But I still see some areas which can be left out, like I mentioned it 2 days ago, tax planning. Under some frameworks, tax planning is, tax practices is considered part of the sustainability reporting. And in Europe, for instance, under some frameworks, it is so. Or bribery, anti-bribery, anti-corruption, and these kind of things. So at the same time, of course, it is very well established, as you very well say, Rani, in terms of historically, and people are familiar with this expression, or whatever it might be. But at the same time, I think that's most lately it's being subject to very. I mean, people use the SG for all and everything, without being very living very clear. Okay, I think it's okay. I think that we should leave it as a matter for consideration in the future, but doesn't change anything here, to my view. I mean, that doesn't change. I think we can leave it as it is for now, and then keep on seeing if it is appropriate or not. Ken.
Thank you, Gabriela. Yeah, it is going to be one of the significant issues to come back to the board on in June. Let us allow Workstream 2 to further explore the matter of definition or description. To my mind, if the concept of sustainability information is fundamental to the standards that we will be developing, it almost sort of sets a relatively high threshold for not trying to define it, because it is going to be so fundamental to the scoping, etc. I would not try to elaborate on the concepts of environmental, social, and governance within the core definition, and I would suggest you try to keep it as conceptual as possible, so that we can be as broad as possible, but to try to elaborate on what we might understand to be environmental, social, or governance considerations. And as we do that we have regard to what the IESBA has itself developed in terms of guidance or application material, because that is what they are doing. They have a technical definition, but then they relay that technical definition to more, let's say, guidance that speaks to the concepts of environmental as we'd understand it, whether it's climate disclosures, greenhouse gases, etc., on social, and governance as well. So they do have material that they've developed that we could use as a base and try to be as converged as possible as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Ken. Any other comments? Christelle, any reaction on your side?
No, point well taken. Just as an illustrative point, I think it's Kristen that sent us a mail yesterday saying that if we take this sustainability information as a support for expression to replace what in the financial world is financial historical information, financial statements, etc. These occurrences appear 250 times in the code. So we need something which is really understandable to use it all over in part 1 and 3 and 5. Okay, thank you very much. We take all of this on board, but I think we are ready to start on that point. Now, this second part was about sustainability assurance practitioner. In fact, here it's just a matter of clarification, since it's the same approach that we presented on Tuesday. Why do we think we need this definition? We need it for the development of ethics standards, part 1 and 3, or equivalent in the part 5 or in a standalone document. Since we're developing profession agnostic standards, we need a neutral term that also covers non-PAs. We need to express who we are speaking about. Then why do we use practitioner instead of provider, was one of the observations. Well, this is to foster the alignment with IEESB, which uses practitioner in ISA 5000, because that is a term also that was used in ISA 3000, okay? And we feel it's broad enough to cover everyone involved, because in the definition it covers the leader, the other members, if applicable, the firm, or we'll make it sure that everybody understands what the firm notion means in the sustainability or in the non-PA world. But the fact that we will choose leader or partner is a workstream 1 topic, and when we are not bothered by that. Well, it's going to come in due course. So I hope I made the explanation that the board might have needed on Tuesday.
Yeah, very clear, Christelle, I think, but let's listen to the board members. See if there is any question or any concern about the approach taken. Laurie?
So I'm comfortable with the approach taken, and I like the word practitioner, but I just wonder if you talked about, in the sustainability space in particular, practitioner sounds like an individual and provider may be an individual or a firm. Did you guys have that discussion?
We meant this as just as the definition is well, the definition is a person or an organization, and it is expressed, and we will keep it like that. So should be clear. Now the firm is more in the audit world, etc. So we'll make sure we have the right explanation, but we can live with this definition, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Laurie and Christelle. Sadia?
Thank you for the update since our last session. I haven't made any specific comments, but I think that I'm comfortable with the working concepts and definitions that we've discussed. I do think that, and I'm asking for forgiveness before it happens, as we go along, we might have revisions to these, or as we see the drafts, we can then assess whether it better fits within a definition versus introductory, whether there's a need for it. But I do think that the task force do need direction and to use something as a working draft and to start drafting. So I'm comfortable with the direction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sadia. Ken?
Thank you, Gabrielle, and maybe it's going to be more a matter for Workstream 1 to think about, and that's the term firm and how that is going to be approached from a sustainability perspective, because the term firm currently in the code is defined as a firm of professional accountants or an entity that controls the particular firm. So it is very much linked to the accounting profession, and I cannot recall whether Workstream 1 has considered this. Sylvia, do you want to share any sort of is it Workstream 1 matter that's been considered?
Yes, the Workstream 1 considered, and at this point we agreed that there is necessary to have a firm definitions, because that's what IEESB will use as well. And at this point we haven't landed on any specific, but as we are getting along with the drafting, we will pick that up. But we believe, and correct me Mark if I'm wrong, that what's currently have for in the code for accounting firms, that the approach that we are planning to follow.
Thank you, Sylvia. Paul, sorry, you were waiting.
Thanks so much. And I think maybe an opening qualification, maybe this is a very non-PA comment, but just wondering whether the use of the term practitioner comes the presumption that we're talking about accountants, that provider is what was a bit more flexible and free for if we're going down a profession agnostic approach, because especially if we're looking at the terms used in 5000 and 3000, those are accounting documents. So that alignment is reaffirming that we're talking about accountants. I'm just questioning whether there's any value in the use of provider, which might be a bit more flexible than practitioner, but I'm a non-PA and maybe I have a particular mindset. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Ken, you?
Just for the board's, I suppose, clarity and understanding as to how the IEESB is approaching the development of its standards. Both ISA 3000 and ISSA 5000 are going to, they are intended to be profession agnostic. ISA 3000 is already profession agnostic. It can be used by non-PAs. And it is using the term practitioner rather than provider. So, so in that context, it's not intended to be linked to the accounting profession or individuals who are performing the assurance procedures that are professional accountants. It is intended to be broad.
Thank you, Ken. I understand. I think that I understand Paul's, and I think that Felicia had raised the same issue yesterday. I understand that for non-professional accountants, the word seems a little bit profession-like, because it's not a term that non-professional accountants currently use. So I think that we have to acknowledge that that risk exists, but that there is also a need to, or at least an advantage in trying to align with the IEESB definition. And so we are, again, in one of those situations where we have to find the right balance between one and the other. If we want to go profession agnostic, I think that we must, when possible, avoid too profession-specific wording, but I also understand that as possible and when possible, we should align with IEESB. So I think that we should leave it for reactions from our stakeholders, namely non-professional accountants, see if there are reactions with respect to the wording. And I'd say that in the appropriate circumstances, we should challenge them, not specifically about this or that, but trying to understand how they feel with respect to what we are suggesting, also in terms of the language, which is an important part.
And if I may add briefly, Gabriel, to your comments, I think the question that Paul and Felicia have raised is a matter that would merit coordination, or at least be added to our list of coordination matters. And I raise this in the context of precisely the text that's at the bottom of the slide, where we are referring to engagement leader versus partner. And on the IEESB side, they have gone with the term engagement leader precisely with a view to try to be more profession agnostic. So one could argue, on the one hand, they have made a change to their standard to try to meet the objective of profession agnostic standards, but on the other hand, yes, there is that term practitioner that is very much entrenched in the historical approach to assurance engagements and therefore the accounting profession.
That's right. Thank you, Ken. Felicia.
Just a quick one, Chair, because I understand ISSA 5000 is still a draft. Is there a way they could also adjust a bit, since it's a draft, not final?
Well, that's what I've said. We're going to add the matter to our coordination, our laundry list of coordination matters, and we will be discussing those issues with them.
Our already long, but not yet complete list of coordination matters, because as we see the issues, it's like popcorn. Each time we open our mouth, there is a coordination issue. So let's see how it goes. Thank you, Felicia. Chana, please.
Thanks, Chair. With respect to the use of assurance practitioner, the IEESB standards do use it a lot compared to our standards, which sort of talks about professional accountants. And also, if we think back to the research done, research provided by IFAC early in the week, we could see like globally about 50% are being done by other providers, and they're using 3000 already. So they are quite familiar with it. Maybe a thing that the task force could look at is how are the ISOs referring to it. Maybe we need a bit of research to see what the other terms are being used by other frameworks, just to get an idea about it. And that could be something that we can explore in our roundtables coming up as well.
Yeah, that's right, Chana, but interestingly enough, and I think I'm not wrong, the IFAC refers in its presentation to other service providers. I think it's the term that is being used by IFAC. So again, food for thought and for discussion. An open topic that does not prevent us from moving forward, because it's very easily adjustable at any point in time. So it's not an issue, but it's something that we should keep alive and discussing on the next few times, to make sure that these little details, small details, matter in terms of what the final picture will look like. So yeah, thank you very much for raising that, Paul and Felicia. I don't see anyone else. So apart from this specific topic, which seems to be the only one that rose here some concerns, comfortable with suggestions? Are they clear? Do you green light to the work stream to start drafting on the basis of these decisions? Okay, that's very good. So, Christelle, anything else on your side?
No, Chair.
You are
Thank
happy?
you. Yeah, again.
Right. I'm happy to know it. So thank you very much for this. And well, I think we can move to the next topic in the agenda, straightforward. Sadia? Do you want to say anything? Oh, so you're adjusting the mic, but I thought that you wanted to say something. So the next and last topic in our agenda, before we move to the other room for the closing session, it's a topic on IEESB and IESBA coordination, an update. As we know, the coordination has been an issue and a topic here in our agenda. So very important going forward, and I would kindly ask Sadia and Carla to present on this specific topic.
Thank you. It seems fitting that IEESB and IESBA coordination is the last topic because we've already mentioned it so many times. It's nice to reflect how much of our attention and efforts go to this year. As a recap, coordination has been a topic on our agenda from 2017 in a formalized way. So it's been a long recurring issue, and it actually started off or been highlighted from monitoring group reforms. It allows for easy adoption, clear implementation, that ethics isn't in isolation, and as well as efficiencies, even though sometimes it does take a lot of time. So I thought I could do a count of how many times we mentioned coordination, and I stopped at 50 on the first day. That's how many times we've been mentioning it. Our strategy mentions it 26 times. But if we can reflect on, so this update is going to give you, sorry, if you're hearing this update for the first time, we do an update on coordination twice a year on plenary. Once is a feedback, and the second time would be actually, hopefully, a joint session. But today what we're going to give you is an update. Well, we're going to give you some feedback or some background, and then we'll give you an update on the current projects and the ongoing projects. Next slide. So what you can be assured is that we have a framework in place, and this framework allows us to set out the meaning and purpose behind the coordinations and operating principles. Do note that we use the word coordination and not alignment, because there might be circumstances where we decide that we cannot be 100% aligned. We also have a criteria of when coordination is needed and other key considerations. So we have a framework, but we also have an inventory. And this inventory is a list of all projects that are currently being coordinated with IEESB, are meant to be coordinated, that's in the future, as well that has been. So if ever you come across a project and you wonder if there has been a coordination effort, there is a resource for you to easily check that. Coordination is actually based on people. So there's a lot of people involvement. We already heard Gabriella saying how she has coordination with the chair of the IEESB. At a staff level, I believe that this happens on a weekly basis, and this happens on an ongoing basis. My counterpart at the IEESB is Chenry. And we have quarterly calls on understanding other issues and making sure that everything is running smoothly. However, when it comes to topic-specific items, we actually have opportunities for IESBA individuals to play a more direct role. In this regard, Rich is actually the IEESB liaison on sustainability, and Sangnam is the liaison for PI rollout. This means that it can be more focused on the projects, and at a project level, it happens in multiple ways. So the IEESB might have a project that needs our coordination effort. We might, the example would have been the QM standards. So the IEESB had QM standards, and then we developed a project. IESBA might have a project that requires the IAASB to have a project, and this is the PI, which is now still ongoing. And then we have it at a strategic level. So in our strategy, we aligned, and recently we even going to be doing some rollout in the way of roundtables and our common sustainability issues. I'm now going to pass over to Carla to run us through some, oh, sorry. Let me just give you some feedback on our last call. So our last call was on the 21st of February, where we actually ran through the master workbook, which is this Excel spreadsheet with multiple pages. But we also asked the question at this call on whether we needed to make any adjustments to the framework, what was missing from it, and what was new items that weren't being accounted for. And thankfully and reassuringly, we understood that everything has been captured. There isn't a risk that we aren't aligned or there's a time issue, but that actually goes to the communication that we have on an ongoing basis. So that staff are alert to what's been happening, and then as a task group, we are mentioning coordination efforts ongoingly on items. So even if not identified during a project, we can identify it. Kalasha, I will hand over to you for the projects.
Thank you, Sadia. So as Sadia mentioned earlier, we do have coordination at the project level and also at non-project level. When we met non-project level is where there's an IESBA project and there's no corresponding IESBA project. So that's where Sadia's role come in, and we assist her in some of the review matters and coordination matters that have been brought up. The slide in front of you will list a couple of projects that is a combination of project related and non-project, directly project related to IESBA. I won't go into detail in fraud. We'll come to that in the next slide. And we'll go to sustainability. As Sadia mentioned, there is coordination at the project level, and Rich is also our liaison member in terms of keeping in touch with the IWC liaison in terms of sustainability related matters. And the next one is on going concern. It is a project that was approved in 2022 by the IESBA. It is chaired by Josephine Jackson, and they expect approval in June 2025. For the benefit of our new members on the board, this project was put in place to revise and promote consistent practice and behavior and facilitate effective response to risk of material misstatement to going concern. The part that would relate to IESBA coordination is some of the revision that relates to identification of entities such as PIs, and also the matter on confidentiality. So the discussions happen at the staff level, and Sadia, Ken, and I be involved with discussions with our IESBA liaison counterparts in terms of the revisions that they're bringing forward, and coordination effort will continue for the rest of the year. The next one is the project and audit of less complex entities. It is a project that's chaired by Kai Morton Hagen, and the project proposal was approved December 2020. The objective of the IESBA for having this project is to develop a separate standard for audit of financial statements of less complex entities, and you'll be able to find more information on this project on your project page. At this stage, the coordination effort will continue into March, and the significant proposals where we need a bit of coordination discussion effort is where they intend to revise the standard in terms of involvement of group audits and some of the discussion around engagement and firm level quality management. The next one is listed entities and PIs, which is something that's been ongoing since 2020, and I believe Jeff Kwan was involved in the discussion and coordination with IESBA counterparts. And the main proposals that we look at from IESBA side is adoption of paragraph 408 of IESBA code, which supports the purpose of establishing different requirements for PIs. Before I go to the next page, I'll pause here to see if any of the board members have any questions on some of these projects. Moving on to the next one. On the IESBA side, sustainability is going to take out most of our time this year. And as I mentioned before, we already have liaison members involved. And the coordination updates will be provided as part of the project work streams. Lastly, I wanted to flag to the board the coordination effort we're undertaking on the matter of IEESB's revision of ISA 240, which is on fraud. As mentioned as part of the ELC update, it is something that IEESB is undertaking. And at this stage, we haven't seen what the drafting looks like. It is coming to us in Q2 in 2020. And the main thing that they like to focus on is the role and responsibility of auditor for detecting fraud and financial statements. Where we come into is where they might be looking into revising the definition of fraud and some of the risk fraud factors that they would like to bring in into the new proposal. I'll pause here to see if there's any questions from members.
Thank you very much, Carla. I see Laurie.
Yes, Carla, can I ask, can you go back one slide? Can we add the experts project onto this list? Because we had a lot of feedback, obviously, and we had it on our own agenda after our first task force meeting, but I think it'll be an important area for us to coordinate.
Apologies, yeah.
No problem. That really just came up this week for discussion. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you, Laurie. Comments, suggestions, views on this report back on the coordination between the two boards. Mark, please.
Thank you. It's good to see, how much work is actually going on in sort of the coordination with the IEESB, and I think, we're all very grateful for the work that goes into it. I think, as we've talked sort of through some of the issues this week, it can sometimes be a little bit scratchy on individual issues, and I think it would be really helpful, without wanting to create more work, if in these sort of periodic updates to the board, we could actually say, here are some of the things that actually happened as a result of our coordination. So it's great to see it all going on, but, it would be really good to say, as a result of the conversations we've had, in this project, this changed to this, or we aligned on this, because I just think that would be a sort of richer picture to discuss around the coordination work that's been going on, to say, we've done all this, and actually, as a result of it, we achieved this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, for that result-oriented perspective of this coordination, which is a good point. Laurie, do you want to speak again? No. Any comments? If not, Carla, back to you.
Thank you, Gabrielle, and thank you, Mark, for that feedback. And to your point, yes, this feedback at this update might seem a bit slim as projects are still ongoing at the moment. So the discussion at even end of Q4 last year and this year, there hasn't been any in terms of discussion that ended in a resolution. So right now, there's been a lot of discussion on we want to revise this. What would that look like if we were to change this? So we haven't come to like a output sort of position. And the next few updates, we will be discussing and unpacking some of those a bit further. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Vania, please.
Thank you, Carla. It's very interesting for us to have this kind of notion, but I was thinking about Mark's comment, and I've been the liaison between IESBA and the IPAI, for example, the educational panel. And I sometimes miss the opportunity of sharing with the board the discussions that we are having. I think that we should have, we know that the time of the meeting is very constrained, but maybe we could prepare a paragraph, something that can be released to the board members so they can follow what's doing just kind of conversations that they are so rich. We sometimes just get to know the end result of that, and maybe the discussion themselves were very fruitful. So just a suggestion.
Thank you, Vania. Carla?
Thank you, Vania. Can I clarify, would that be in relation to coordination with IESB, or is it the Education Board?
No, I was thinking much more in some coordination that board members have representing IESBA before other organisms like the Education Board, like this coordination with IESB. I think it is important that the board knows the representatives met, the main topics discussed were that one, those ones, and the conclusions so far, despite the fact that it is ongoing, is that this and that. So I think just to be released to the board members, we don't need to have presentations, but just a way of taking care of.
Okay, point taken, and we'll see moving forward how we can enhance the internal communications with board members about this kind of interactions. Ken, do you want to say that? No, okay. I was seeing your body language, and I thought that you would want to say something. So, Carla.
Thank you, Chair. That's the update for coordination.
Okay, so thank you very much, Sadia. I suppose that you don't want to say anything else. So, Sadia, Carla, thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you also for keeping alive this extremely important, as we have been seeing, coordination between the two boards. And we will think on the future about including in these communications or presentations or whatever, a little bit more flavor about other interactions from board members or staff at the staff level as well, with other panels, other boards, etc. And with this, I'd like to this part of this topic is also has been brought to the end, the meeting as well. But before we close the meeting, I'd like to invite Robert Buchanan, PIOB representative, chair of the new Foundation on Ethics and Audit, to provide his final comments on behalf of the PIOB about this meeting and this week.
Thank you, Chair. And I don't really have anything to add, but just by way of summary, it's been a great privilege to me to have been able to be here in person. My first, as I said, my first in-person observation of the IESBA board. I have a great love of this board and of its work, having been interested in ethics throughout my professional career. And I think it's been a wonderful week. I'd like actually, Chair, just to pay tribute to the new members whom we PIOB appointed this year, and just to congratulate you on your wonderful contributions throughout the week, meeting all the expectations that we have of new members. The public interest focus of the discussions has been really great, and I'm very pleased that that little, I hope it wasn't a lecture about the PIF, has proven to be helpful, as has been noted a number of times by task force leaders. So let's continue with that work, and in fact James and I have had some discussion since that intervention that I made just about making the public interest framework visible to everyone a bit more. So it will be, as he said yesterday, will be visible on the new website. And it's something that we need to become, all need to become more familiar with as we move forward. So I'm confident that that will happen. So I think I can say from the PIOB, thanks very much for the public interest responsiveness and all of the deliberations during the week. We look forward, Gabriella, to meeting you at our meeting in Madrid in just 3 weeks from now, and we will be able to continue the discussions there with you, and indeed I can let people know that we're just in the process of organising a private workshop for the POB members on sustainability, with a number of invited speakers, including Gabriella and Tom, to be able to bring the PIOB members up to speed with where things are going. I wish you good luck with the roundtables. I will be at the Sydney one for at least part of the day, and I'm really looking forward to that. And I think we can be really confident that the roundtables will produce a lot of direction and feedback that will give confidence, add to the confidence that the task force in both work streams this week, I think, has got from your discussions. So that's probably all I need to say, Gabriella, and just to thank you again. And I think Begonia Gaina, Professor Gaina, will be with you in June, and I hope to be back when the rotation allows. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert, for your last words for today. And now it's my time, I think, to close the session. And we don't have much time, but I think that I need to say a few words here before I go to the more administrative issues about what happened here this week. Well, first thing, of course, we were meeting in a different place, and I think that it helped us keeping all this amazing energy and focus over the week. I was surprised, impressed, and I couldn't believe that on the 5th day of the meeting, the board keeps on being so focused, so contributing so much and so energetic. I just hope that this is not only an effect of being in Abu Dhabi, which of course contributed these amazing conditions that were offered to us by other. I'm sure that they also inspired us, but also, and I'm speaking seriously, provided us with a very comfortable, appropriate conditions to have the peace of mind and the clarity that we need to discuss what we have been discussing over this week. So this is the first thing that I'd like to say, and I'm really grateful and happy, like Christelle would say, by what happened here this week, because the level of contribution, the strategic thinking of the board, the transparency of the positions, and the fact that everybody is contributing, and I have to stress this again, because what we see here is a board of 18 members where everybody speaks, everybody contributes, and I hope that going forward, it keeps being like this, that nobody is afraid of speaking, questioning, having doubts, dissenting views, etc. This is what makes us rich, and I think that I hope that moving forward, that we will not lose this attitude that I saw here over this week. Secondly, there were a lot of things. I'm not going through the agenda. You know what happened here. We had a strong focus on sustainability, and I think that even if this is still early days, I think that we held the appropriate discussions, because we did not exactly make many decisions. We are willing to listen to our stakeholders, because at the IESBA we walk the talk, so we are always saying that we want to listen to stakeholders, we want to reach out to stakeholders. We are doing a lot of effort in that respect, but it's not about going around the world to go around the world, which, by the way, is extremely exhausting. It's because we really want to listen to stakeholders. So this roundtables is putting in practice what we say that we do, and I think that what was prepared here in terms of what are going to be the discussions at the roundtable shows that we are, our minds are open, our hearts as well, and that we don't have any preconceived positions or concepts or whatever that will not allow us to listen to the others and take out from those discussions what is necessary for us to, again, walk the talk. And if we want to be relevant in what we are going to do in our standards, profession agnostic, etc., we have to do it right. Use of experts, an extraordinary kickoff of a project that I see as being a long shot project, because well, I'm not going to repeat what I already said about being cross-cutting, impacting a lot of areas of our work, etc. But it's still, again, early days, but clearly the task force got it right in terms of identifying the issues and asking the board for contributions and for confirmation that these are the issues that we will have to address. To the two task forces at this stage, good luck, because this is not, this is really the start. Good luck. And seriously, this board will have two challenging years ahead. I just hope that you, really hope that you can keep this energy and this strong will to make things happen that I saw here this week, because we will need it. There will be times where we will believe that this is not going to happen, we are not going to be able to do it. And this is the process. This is what always happens in a project. You have the high, then you have the lows, the ebbs and flows, and times where you believe, times where you don't believe. But one thing I'm sure is that we have the right people and the right will to get there. Strategy and work plan, an amazing moment today with applauses for the strategy and work plan, and a very, again, I think it's a very symbolic document of this board. Because of how much thinking, how much strategic mindset, discussions, etc., are included therein. It's not just a guidance. It's really the product of this board telling the world, well, what we think that we should do and how we can contribute to a certain purpose is this. Then let's see what we hear from. And very interesting discussions on the IRC. I'm not going to mention how amazing it was to see ChatGPT working lively. I'm still impressed because, just like Mark, I had never tried it. So it was really, really impressive, but also interesting to see how much we will have to reflect upon these technological developments around us and social developments and financial developments and etc. This is the role of the IOC. We don't have to be afraid of the IOC capturing the reality. On the contrary, it's what makes us have our eyes wide open and have the information and the perceptions which are necessary to make the standards, or keep the standards being relevant and appropriate for a certain moment in time and a certain context. On the PI rollout, we saw how this is translating into many different jurisdictions being familiar to this concept and responding to our requests to tell where are they in this implementation process, what difficulties they have, etc. But I encourage all the board members to keep on doing the efforts that are necessary to make sure that this concept is embedded in each jurisdiction, and try to bring back the difficulties, if any, the requests, because it's really something that we have to make sure that in a relatively short period, the PI concept will be there in all the jurisdictions and all the markets. Communications, it was a very interesting presentation from Dave Johnson that again I thank for the good presentation that was made. There is a lot of this was a very promising and forward-looking presentation. I think that we mentioned the topic many times here about the importance of good professional communications to help and contribute substantially to the goal. So these communications, I hope, will be an area with which we will walk hand in hand and not top down, because it's really something that we need to make sure that what we do reach the right audience. And finally, we had an executive session with this presentation about the foundation. This is a good segue to the next comment, which is this board is taking place at a moment where so many things are changing. It's not only what we are doing, the topics that we are addressing, but our context, our governance, our institutional shape is also in a transitioning mode. I think that the presentation yesterday brought you a lot of information that you probably were not completely aware and that you were probably not able to absorb 100% because it was a lot of information in a short period of time. We will help with that. The request that was made by Jens was more than legitimate and necessary to avoid any risks in terms of the communication that each one of you will have to have with your closer stakeholders. So we will help in that respect. The presentation was distributed already, I think, wasn't it? Well, on a confidential basis for the time being, because the foundation has not been publicly announced. And so the public, going public with this, or enlarging the number of people who have access to this presentation might raise too early comments or questions that we hope to be in a position to respond in a structured way in a short term, but we are working on that. So the presentation, I think that is already the basis of a lot of information that you may need to manage your own communications, because as Jens was saying, it is probable that most of you will be questioned about what it means, about aspects of this transition, and so I hope that you already have some information which is necessary for that purpose. But we will try to put together something more structured. I mean, I'm not going to compromise with the deadlines and contents, but we will try to put together something that will help the board and then afterwards the external stakeholders to have a structured vision of what's happening here. What's happening here is really about the implementation of the recommendations of the monitoring group. I invite you, I can share with you if you don't have it, but I imagine that some of you may never have never read the monitoring group recommendations. And I hope you do, if you don't, or if you read them again, because it helps a lot understanding what's happening here. This has a long story behind. I'm not going to tell you the story. This has a lot of tensions as well. It's no use trying to pretend that it was not the case. But any developments, any progress takes tension. Change brings a lot of pain, but I believe a lot of pleasure as well, most time more pleasure than pain, so let's go through this. But we are really transitioning. We are really at a moment where a lot of things around us are changing. We are not struggling, but for instance, for Tom and I, and just to put this in perspective, it means that having a new job on top of the job that we already had changes a few things. Well, not only the number of hours per day, which doesn't change much because it was not possible anymore. So we will have to make on the same hours of the day a few other things, but it's about us all as a board, staff, leadership, PIOB, trustees. Well, there is a number of entities and governance structures around this that we will have to learn to live with each other. And that's what we are doing in our good faith and with this very clear purpose of making this transition happening for the reasons why it was suggested or proposed or recommended by the monitoring group. So I am happy, like Christelle, about everything, even about the disagreements around the table, because they are necessary to challenge us and to make us progress. I would be very concerned if over these 5 days we were all in agreement around everything. That would be a very bad sign. It would mean that we would just doing more of the same, which is not what we want to do. I'm happy for that, and I'm happy to be here in a moment of transition and of changing in all senses, because I think that change is almost always a good thing, as long as we can deal with it appropriately and respecting the people which is around us and who work with us, and for us, which is the most important part of it. And so with this, I think that I should congratulate the board and thank you heartfeltly for everything that happened here this week. And of course, a special word, we will have a closing session with Ada, but for the record, I leave here my gratefulness, the expression of my deepest gratefulness to Ada for everything that they provided us over this week. This unique opportunity to meet in such a place, to meet for the first time in the Middle East, to come to Abu Dhabi, and to see our code being being adopted in this jurisdiction by surprise. I didn't know, I tell you, I didn't know. I was completely taken by surprise. I mean, there was an idea that ADA could adopt it, but it was really a gift, and adopting the code with such a wide scope, remit, etc., going well beyond what we could expect. So this was a successful week, but be careful because it doesn't stop now. It's the start of a long journey until for the next two years. So thank you very much to all of you, board members, technical advisors who supported everybody so much over this week. Staff always deserves from my side a very special word, and one specific in this case, because to Diana and Astu, who made this board meeting possible, because it's invisible, but the work that it takes to organize a board meeting outside New York, well, organizing it in New York is already a heavy thing. Organizing it outside New York, it's really a nightmare. Of course, they had the very kind and effective help and collaboration of the local authority, but there are a lot of things that it's on the IESBA to do. So thank you, Astu, and thank you, Diana. I don't know where Diana is, but well, thank you to Diana as well. And so I think, yeah, for now, it's what I would like to say. Then the further thank you will be said in the next session. I'd like just to recall that the next board meeting will be held in New York on June 12, 6 to 16, on the week of 12 to 16 of June. And I hope to see you there all. Some of you I will hopefully meet you before that, namely in Lisbon, where I was invited to participate in the drafting group of Workstream 1. So I'm going to cancel everything for those 3 days, because I will be drafting standards with Mark over these 3 days. Yeah, but I hope to see some of you there. The others, I'll see you in New York, and thank you very much for everything. Safe travels back home for those with whom, by chance, I will not speak before leaving. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabriela. So we will allow a 10-minute break so the technicians can move the videos across. So we are ready? Okay. So if you would make your way to the panel session room. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished guests, these past 5 very productive days have given us much to think about, and we are now approaching the end of this event. We begin the week with the announcement of ADA's full and early adoption of IESBA's 2022 Code of Ethics and its applicability to accountants and auditors under ADA's mandate with the effect from 31st December 2023. And moving on, I'm sure you had a productive week here in Abu Dhabi, and you would be happy to know that I'm talking here about myself and my colleagues at ADA, and I'm confident many others watching online have gained lots of insights while following your interesting deliberation on where IESBA is heading, with all the efforts spent on the founding of ethical standards for sustainability assurance, building on the existing IESBA's Code of Ethics. And now, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Gabriela to deliver her closing remarks.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here in this last final part of this amazing 5 days in Abu Dhabi under the very kind invitation of ADA. This moment is mostly for us, for me, on behalf of the IESBA, to thank the ADA and all those who were involved in providing us such wonderful conditions and opportunities over this week. My first thanks go, of course, to all those who participated in the meetings, events over this week, and for their very important contributions. I'd also like to thank heartfeltly to the ADA for hosting our hybrid meeting and side events. Special thank you to His Excellency Humaid Habushibaz. Very special thank you to Mr. Wael Abdul Kader. And thank you, of course, my Al-Meri, Fatima Lari, who was with us all the time, Aisha Al-Shariani, Fatima Al-Falahi, Nuf Al-Kahabi. Thank you very specially to Mahita Alebri, who has been our main point of contact, not only during this meeting and solving a lot of problems over this week, or problems or issues that we created, of course. There were no issues on the other side, but helping us overcoming some issues, staying with us, being our main point of contact, not only this week, but also in the lead up of this milestone meeting of the IESBA. Our thanks also to the observers that over this week have followed the meeting and as well to the other employees that made this happen and possible, and others who join us lively here in Abu Dhabi, and also to those who join us virtually on the IESBA and other YouTube channels, where we have had over 1,000 views over the proceedings. So this is an amazing result and an amazing milestone. Lastly, our thanks to everyone at ADA who was involved in making this event happening. And before I close, because this is our really closing remarks, I can't help but mentioning again the special gift that we were given here on Monday, which was to know that ADA had adopted the IESBA 2022 Code of Ethics. This is a milestone for us. It was and it will be an extremely important moment, happening decision. This is really about going beyond our more traditional frontiers, reaching to out new stakeholders, but above all, having the satisfaction of seeing jurisdictions and authorities like ADA recognizing the value and the importance of ethics. This is the final purpose of what we do. Standards in itself don't mean much. They mean a lot. They are really impactful when they are applied, and they make ethics be higher in the agenda, be more relevant within organizations, and helping creating the trust that we need for the financial markets, economies, and society ultimately to function well. So thank you very much for that as well, for your vision, for your sophistication, and I wish you all the best in the use of this code and implementing this code. Mr. Wael, thank you very much, in particular for all the kind and very gentle and warm hosting of this meeting, and welcome. So if you could join me on the stage, if I may ask you to join me on the stage, I'd appreciate. And I'd like you, on behalf, to accept on behalf of ADA, a very humble gift from the IESBA. Thank you so much. And we also have something more. The ADA, everybody at ADA who helped this meeting happen.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gabriel, for your valuable input and the closing remark. Now I would like to ask Mr. Wael to come in to give his closing remarks as well.
I will not make it too long. Dear esteemed board members and attendees, firstly, I would like to send you the greetings of His Excellency, the Chairman of Abu Dhabi Accountability Authority, and his appreciation to your efforts and role in promoting ethical principles across the world. It was delightful to have you here in the capital of United Arab Emirates, hosting IESBA board meeting for the first time in the region is a great honor for us. We took this chance to promote the principles of ethics in the region and enlighten our stakeholders with the efforts in place to develop these principles. During this week, we heard from you about your future plans and projects in respect of issuing ethical standards for sustainability and assurance, for sustainability reporting and assurance, and the developments for the implementation of the new provisions of the Code of Ethics in 2022 across different jurisdictions. And we are happy to continue coordinating with you during our early adoption of the code. We are looking forward for future collaboration and continuing our shared purpose of raising awareness and promoting ethical principles. Special thanks to the chair of IESBA board and the esteemed member of the board and the advisory group of IESBA. Also, I would like to thank all the members from ADA and IESBA team, and we hope that you enjoyed your stay in Abu Dhabi and looking forward to more ethical thinking with you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wael, for your remark as well. It has been a pleasure to host the board meeting, and perhaps we could see you all again coming back to Abu Dhabi to water the mangroves you planted earlier this week. We wish you all a safe flight back home. And now we would like to take a group photo of all the members and esteemed observers here on the podium, please.